I'd just fallen asleep when I heard a loud knock at the front door. Dazed, I got up and opened it. My partner, Skip Andrew, was standing there dressed in suit and tie. "Chairman Fred is dead. I just got a call from Rush. The pigs vamped on the chairman's crib this morning."
The spirit of the Black Panther Party lived on in this city, and the coalitions we'd pulled together ultimately elected Harold Washington as president and created the political climate that led to a community organizer named Barack Obama being elected first senator, then president of the United States. Former Deputy Minister of Defense Bobby Rush was elected first alderman, then United States congressman, representing the same community he'd served as a party member. Those of us who'd once belonged to the Illinois chapter have gone on to lead principled and meaningful lives, and Fred Hampton lives on in our hearts and minds.
Thank you, Lynn. Our next speaker is Willie Calvin. Willie Calvin was the defense captain for the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party, and later he was appointed to the Illinois Central Committee as Deputy Minister of Information. Calvin has been a member of Trinity United Church of Christ in Chicago for over 20 years, and he's a member of Trinity's Africa Ministry as well as Trinity's Community Development Corporation. Calvin has been married for 37 years to his wife, Dr. Donna J. Calvin, and they have 2 children. Willie Calvin.
Thank you and good evening. It's always difficult following behind an attorney because they're always organized. Many of you were here earlier who saw the movie, and my first question was, how did I become involved in the Black Panther Party? Since my wife is here, I'm going to have to stay on task because I can go around the corner and then back and still won't be the answer to the question. But how I got involved in the Black Panther Party, in 1965, I was playing basketball on the west side of Chicago, and I thought I was going to be 6'7" and make it to the NBA. My dreams got dashed, and I realized that I wasn't going to make it. And I decided I needed a change. And so I decided to join the military. I wanted to go to Germany because my cousin was there. Little did I know that they were having a war because I wasn't politically active. So what I had to do was I went and told my mother that I wanted to go to the Army, and she said no. I went and told my father, and he said, no, I'm not going to sign for you to go. So what I did was I waited till my mother was in the beauty shop with some of her friends, and I went in and I told her that I wanted to go, and then in order to get rid of me, she said, okay, I'll sign, go ahead. My father still wouldn't sign, so I went down to the neighborhood currency exchange, forged his name, and then I went into the service. But while I was in the service, what happened is one day someone came and put a book on my bed, and it was Malcolm X Speak. And I began reading that book, and all of a sudden, I had a consciousness. I started thinking about things that were going on, not just myself, but around me and by the world. And so my attitude changed. I started looking at the world differently. In 1968, I was the CQ on duty. And while I was there, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was killed. And I got the news, and I didn't know Dr. King, but I felt a connection to what had happened. And so I had 3 or 4 days off. I decided to leave Fort Knox, Kentucky, and take the bus home. When I lived on the west side of Chicago, Roosevelt and Springfield. But when I got to Chicago, I was in a cab, and he put me off at California. He says, I can't go any further. What do you mean you can't go any further? I still have 20 more blocks to go. He says, they're rioting down there. So I walked the 20 blocks, got to my house, and I saw all of the things that were going on. I saw my neighborhood going up in flames. And I was concerned about how would I deal with this? You got to remember now what was going on back in the military. We were being armed and getting ready to be deployed to come to put down the riots in our own community. And I'm like, how would I react going into my community, putting down some riots? So what I did was I took a passive resistance. I stood on the sidelines and I watched people. And one of the things that I did was I watched people as they were looting and stealing and doing things like that. One of the things that it was funny, but it was saddening. We were on Roosevelt and Colon, and there was a store there, and it had burglar bars. And a group of people ran into this store and started looting. The police came behind them, closed the burglar bars, and put the lock on it, essentially locking them up in jail. And so I'm standing there, and I'm just looking at this, and I'm saying, this is really a bad situation. So also during that same time, Muhammad Ali was being persecuted in Louisville, Kentucky, and I was in Fort Knox, Kentucky. And I'm saying, why do they want to bring him here? We're not doing anything. Ain't nothing happening. He can stay out there doing what he's doing. But they're persecuting him because they wanted him to come into the military. So what happened then was I started getting some consciousness. I went into Louisville one weekend, and I came back. I bought some beads and put them around my neck. Didn't know what the heck it meant, but I had them. I come back in, my CO said, "What is that around your neck?" And I'm standing there looking at him, and I said, "It stands for pride and unity amongst the black community." It must have been God, because I surely didn't know what the heck I was talking about. But later that year, in July of 1968, I got out of the service, came home, decided I was going to go to school. I needed an education. And so I started school at Crane Junior College. Little did I know that right then and there, they were getting ready to organize to bring Malcolm X College into fruition. All I wanted to do was get an education. I don't want to get involved in all of this stuff. I need to get an education. So we started organizing. We wanted to select a name. After we selected the name for the school, we got that approved. Then we went out and we recruited and got a president. Then after we got the president, then we started organizing. They had already approved the budget to create a new building, which is at 1900 West Van Buren, I believe. That's the address. So then they got the school, and then we were able to move in. But during all of this time, there were a lot of issues going on, a lot of struggles that were going on. But before I forget, let me deviate just a little bit. One of the things that I did see when I came back from the service is that black folks, in particular in my neighborhood, had began to communicate and talk. I could get on the bus, and people were being genuinely nice, speaking as you got on the bus, saying, "Hello, how you doing? Would you like to get my seat?" Those type of things. So I had began to see unity amongst people in the community, and that made my heart feel really good. What happened later, and Attorney French mentioned it earlier, while we were organizing, the Black Panther Party would be coming over to Malcolm X holding rallies. And every time they would come over, they would bring over this young, dynamic, hard-driving young man by the name of Fred Hampton. And when you heard Fred speak and the compassion that he had and the branding that he had on the organization, you could not just sit there and do nothing. You had to want to get involved. We in the Black Student Union at that time were organizing a trip to go to Africa. I wanted to go to Africa. I had never been there, and I wanted to see my people. But I was torn between going to Africa and serving with the Black Panther Party. So I think that whole weekend I struggled with what should I do and how should I deal with it. But I was convicted by Fred, and I was convicted by the cause, and I decided that my time had come. I needed to join the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party. My role in the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party was the captain of defense. Now, here it is, and I'm going to be brief because I got a lot of stuff that I needed to cover. Here I am, the chairman, I'm the captain of defense in the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party, but I'm surrounded by Fred Hampton, Bobby Rush, and the whole Central Committee. So my job was an easy job. Just stay out of the way, let them do everything, and occasionally they'll say, "What you think?" And then I'll say, "Okay, yeah, here we go, and we'll do that." So that was my role, and then I got a chance to travel with Fred. I got a chance to travel with Rush, and I'll talk a little bit about my traveling with Fred a little bit later. The misconceptions, or some of the common misconceptions about the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party, or the Black Panther Party period, was that it was a gang. No, it was not a gang. It was an organization that had a mission, and it had a mission statement, and that was the 10-point program and platform that many people hear about, that we wanted education, closing, justice, and peace. So those were tangible things that people could put their hands on, that we wanted, because we wanted to see the world in terms of a vision, what we wanted to see, what we wanted the world to look like and how it should be. And so those were some of the things that I think the misconception is that we were gangbangers, we were out there selling drugs, we were out there provoking the police officers. I'm not going to call them pigs right now, but we were out there provoking the police, and we were just being disrespectful. But what we were trying to do is make meaningful social change, so in the year 2009, we wouldn't be talking about health care. We wouldn't have a debate. We would be having health care reform. It would be already in action. The role that the women played in the party was very significant, and I think in many cases they did not get the recognition for what had to be done. Again, I think back at the movie, and you would always see the role that the women were playing in terms of the organization that they were able to bring, the level-headed thinking, and the challenging of things that we should do. I don't think many women would take the position that, okay, we're going to get organized and we're going to fight the police, but we're going to go into a second-story building and we're going to be surrounded by the police. That would only be a man thinking, because we so macho. Yeah, they got all of the weapons, but we got a few up here. So what we're going to do, we're going to go up here and we're going to let them attack us, and then we're going to win. So the women would bring some balance to it. They would say things like Attorney French said, "What kind of blood do you need after you get shot?" Yeah, those types of things, to bring it back down to reality. Yeah. The Chairman Fred talked about the need for us to have coalitions, that it was more important to have coalitions than to just be isolated on an island by ourselves. So we needed to work with people that was willing to work with us. And I think that's why it was so important for us to have white organizations work with us, Latino organizations work with us. But what we emphasized to the white community was that your job is to go and organize in your community, not in ours. And we likewise, we would organize in our community. And we thought it was a nice mix. Plus, they had resources and we didn't. They had money and cars, we didn't. So we needed things, and we was humble enough to go and say, "Can you help us out?" And they were willing to help us out because they were looking at it with a broader stroke in terms of what was the importance. Now, to me, Fred was always it was a nice, warm, cheerful, loving person who was always trying to quit smoking. And so what he would do, he would light up and then he would pass it to somebody else, But he said, "I ain't smoking," but he would give it to somebody else. But, you could see Fred, his compassion was that he loved what he was doing. He said, "I'm not going to die in no car accident. I'm not going to die slipping on no ice. I'm going to die high off the people." And when you was around him, you could feel that his feeling was genuine. He wasn't just talking. he was living it, And so he had set for himself a priority that he felt was worth dying for. But he was a jokester. He was a nice, warm, loving person, and to some people, always there's another side when other people be with people. But I had the opportunity to travel with Fred in Canada. And so what we would do is I would be Fred one day. I would walk in and they would introduce him and I would step up to the podium and I would start talking and things like that. So he would always want to be joking around and having some fun, but he knew the seriousness of what the revolutionary struggle was and how important it was for our people. December the 4th was a strange morning for me, really strange. I still to this day cannot remember where I was. But I do know that when I got the news, I could not believe it. I walked around saying, no, it can't be real. No, it's not real. And I think we traveled from the south side of Chicago to the west side, and I still cannot believe it and would not believe it, even up to this day. So it changed my life in the sense that I never looked at life the same, and I never looked at death the same. One of the things that I made a conscious effort to do was to remember Fred when he was alive. So I never went inside the funeral home when he was being eulogized, because I did not want to have his last memories of him lying in the casket. So when I see Fred, I still see Fred as the vibrant young leader of the Revolutionary Party in the state of Illinois and in the U.S. And that's how important he is for me. The lessons learned is that for the activists that are here today, continue to work hard and believe in the causes that you're fighting for, and be willing to sacrifice all that's necessary in order to achieve it. So with that, all power to the people.
Thank you, Willie. Our next speaker is Jeffrey Haas. Jeff graduated from the University of Michigan in 1963 and the University of Chicago Law School in 1967. He worked for the Legal Assistance Foundation in Chicago from 1967 to 1969. In August of '67, Haas, 3 other lawyers, and 2 law students started the People's Law Office. Their first clients were Black Panthers, Young Lords, Students for Democratic Society members, and demonstrators against the Vietnam War. After the December 4th, 1969 raid, for 13 years, Jeff and his partners at the People's Law Office represented the families of Fred Hampton and Mark Clark and the Panther survivors in a civil suit. He continued working for the People's Law Office as a criminal defense and civil rights lawyer for 35 years until 2004. Jeff is the author of the recently released book, which we have outside in the lobby, The Assassination of Fred Hampton, How the FBI and the Chicago Police Murdered a Black Panther. Jeff Haas.
Thank you very much. I just want to dispute one thing that Willie Calvin said, is that he brought his list of questions here today, so some of us lawyers aren't so organized, and I had to look at his list. But anyway, my name is Jeffrey Haas, and it's great to be back in Chicago, where I spent most of my adult life. 40 years ago today, I had met Fred Hampton when he came out of jail, and if some of you just saw that film, that speech that he made in the church, my partners, we had just formed the People's Law Office, and my partners had gotten Fred Hampton out on an appeal bond. I went to the University of Chicago. I worked for Legal Aid, but there was so much exciting happening in Chicago. The Democratic Convention, the defense of the demonstrators, the Black Panthers, the Young Lords, the Weathermen, SDS, all of these things, the anti-war movement. So I, like a number of people, wanted to be a lawyer for the movement, and in particular, a lawyer for the Black Panthers, because they had dramatically attracted the energy and the intention of people in Chicago, of the black community in Chicago, and we couldn't be lawyers for the Black Panthers working for legal aid. So we started the People's Law Office in an old sausage shop on Halsted Street, and a month later, my partners had gotten Fred out on an appeal bond, and I was in that church, and I guess like many others, I was sitting there hesitantly. I was a lawyer for the movement. That was pretty cool. And Fred stood up, like he said, and he raised his right hand and he said, "I am." And I'm sitting there and, okay, I am a revolutionary, he said. And the words didn't work with me. That sort of swallowed in my throat. And I considered myself a lawyer for the movement, but not of the movement. But Fred said it again, and then he said it again. And by the fourth and fifth time when Fred said, "I am a revolutionary," I was standing up like everybody else. And it was a threshold that he took me and I think many other people over. He had the ability to move and inspire people. That was in August. 40 years ago today, I was in the Panther office because the Panthers had decided to purchase their building on Madison Street. The reason they wanted to buy it was the police had shot it up a number of times and the FBI had ransacked it. And the landlord was not pleased because they weren't doing much for the property value over there on Madison Avenue. So I went over there and met Fred, and we talked about what he'd have to sign, and the Panthers had raised the money. And I just have this image of almost exactly this time of day, leaving the Panther office. And as I walk out, Fred was like giving instructions. Show up for the breakfast program on time in the morning. Come to political education classes. Sell your quota of papers. And people were bouncing questions on and off of Fred. And it seemed like everybody he was giving energy and taking energy from everybody. And everybody seemed to be at a higher level just from being around Fred Hampton. And I walked out the door on December 2nd. And of course, he said, "Power to the people," and I responded, "Power to the people." I just want to say the other thing about Fred. He was not just telling people what to do. He was there himself. He was not saying, "You go to the breakfast program," because he was there serving the children at 6 a.m., just like he asked everybody else to do. So I went home, and the next day I had to finish a housing proposal. I was out all night getting it typed. If you remember in those days when you had to type something that couldn't have mistakes, you had to have Correcto type and carbon paper, and I was up doing that. And actually there was a woman helping me doing the typing. Actually, she was doing the typing and I was doing the dictating, but that was the time that was happening. And I got back to my apartment about 6 o'clock in the morning on December 4th. I had been out on December 3rd, and I got back about 6:30 in the morning. And I'm just going to read a brief portion from my book. "I'd just fallen asleep when I heard a loud knock at the front door. Dazed, I got up and opened it. My partner, Skip Andrew, was standing there dressed in suit and tie. "Chairman Fred is dead. I just got a call from Rush. The pigs vamped on the chairman's crib this morning." I remained stuck on the words, "Chairman Fred is dead." Someone else was killed and a lot of people were shot. Deborah Johnson and some others are at the Wood Street Police Station. The people wounded are at Cook County Hospital. What should I do?" I asked. "I'm meeting Rush at the morgue, and then we are going to the chairman's crib. Why don't you go to Wood Street and try to talk to some of the survivors?" "Sure," I stammered. He turned abruptly and was gone down the steps. Fred Hampton dead? I had just seen him at the Panther office looking bigger than life. I couldn't imagine him motionless. I replayed Skip's words in my mind, "The chairman is dead." It was Fred who made us believe we were strong and unstoppable, and now he was dead. I went to the Wood Street Police Station that morning, and after overcoming Hanrahan's orders that no one was to be allowed to see the people who were in custody after the raid, I read the criminal statute and finally got somebody to let me in. And the first person I saw was Akua Najeri, who's here, whose name was Deborah Johnson at that time. And I just want to say this is the morning of December 4th, about 3 hours after the raid. It was cold in the tiny windowless interview room at the Wood Street police station. I looked across the table at the large-boned woman with a short afro who was shaking and sobbing. Deborah Johnson's patterned nightgown outlined her protruding belly, revealing her pregnancy. Fred never really woke up, she said. He was lying there when they pulled me out of the bedroom. She paused. And then I asked, 2 pigs went back into the bedroom. One of them said, he's barely alive, he'll barely make it. I heard 2 shots, then I heard, he's good and dead now. Fred's fiancée looked at me with sad, swollen eyes. What can you do? I couldn't think of any reply. I couldn't bring Fred back to life. When I then continued interviewing the other survivors who had not been shot at the Wood Street police station, my partner, Skip Andrew, and the rest of people from the People's Law Office went to the scene, which, as someone said, amazingly was not sealed off. And if you saw that film, it was because Skip Andrew had the presence of mind to bring a filmmaker with him, so that what you see is what they saw when they opened the door and saw the apartment totally ransacked by the police, the bullet holes, the blood. That was the way the police left the apartment. And they spent the next several days gathering the evidence, photographing the walls, picking up each bullet and bullet fragment. I think I'm not going to go into all the details, but Hanrahan's story that he was fired upon by the Panthers and that there was a shootout and that Fred Hampton fired from his back bedroom all turned out to be lies. They were exposed a lot because the Panthers took the community through there. Somebody from the community commented, this ain't nothing but a northern lynching. And that was the sentiment in the black community. As a result, Hanrahan tried to keep telling his story. He was caught up in so many lies, and eventually the charges against the survivors were dropped. So what should we do now? It was 6 months later. And somebody said, and the people who had survived, and Mrs. Hampton and Mrs. Clark and Deborah and other people said, well, we can't just let them get away with murder. So we filed a civil suit, and here we were, the people's lawyers. Well, we had represented demonstrators. We knew the criminal courts pretty well. We didn't know anything about federal courts. We didn't know anything about civil law. But so we got a lot of support from the Black Bar here in Chicago, from the National Lawyers Guild, from a famous civil rights lawyer named Arthur Kanoy, and they came in and said, you got to sue those guys. You got to sue Hanrahan and the police. So we did. We put together a complaint and we charged a conspiracy of Hanrahan, the police, the crime lab who had dummied up some evidence, and the Internal Investigation Division. And this was in 1970, 6 months after the raid. And we drew a terrible judge, a judge named Sam Perry, who hated our clients because they were Panthers. He hated us because we were young radical lawyers. But most of all, he hated the fact that we said the government murdered Fred Hampton in his bed, and it was an assassination. And he dismissed our case. He was so outraged at what he called these scurrilous charges. The conduct he didn't consider scurrilous, but the naming it he considered scurrilous. And so after 2.5 years, we had been tossed out of court. We had to appeal. And then the movie was made about this time, and the movie was made before a very, very important part of the case came to light. And what happened was, about 1973, an informant named William O'Neill testified in federal court. And he said, I been an informant since 1967. Well, we all knew William O'Neill. He was at one point Fred's bodyguard. He was at one point chief of security in the Panthers. And O'Neill was this very flamboyant, provocative person. And I used to think, well, an informant is somebody who kind of sits in the corner unobtrusively and takes mental notes. That was not William O'Neill. William O'Neill was a flashy guy. He was always trying to convince people to do illegal things. Ironically, he built an electric chair to scare people who might be informants from joining the party when he was an informant. And so we wondered, well, it turned out O'Neill was also present the night Fred was killed in the apartment, although he left early. And there was evidence that Fred had been drugged, and that's why, as Akua describes, he never really woke up. And we wondered if O'Neill had a role in that. Meanwhile, we also had learned that there was this federal program called Counterintelligence Program, COINTELPRO. It came out because there was a burglary of an FBI office. And this program talked about targeting the entire black movement. It targeted Dr. King, but its main target was the Black Panthers, who J. Edgar Hoover felt or stated was the biggest threat to national security in the United States. And this program explicitly ordered FBI offices in every city where there was a Panther chapter to set up hard-hitting programs aimed to destroy, disrupt, and neutralize the Panthers. FBI agents were encouraged to destroy the Panthers and what they stand for, including the breakfast program. The COINTELPRO explicitly said, let's prevent the coalition of the Panthers with other groups, let's discredit the Panthers. And there was one other stated explicit objective of the FBI program: prevent the rise of a messiah who could unify and electrify the black nationalist movement. At that point, Hoover considered any black independent group that had a national headquarters to be a black nationalist movement. And we wondered, is there a connection between this FBI program and O'Neill and Fred's death? And we kept asking in court, and we kept being told there was no connection between COINTELPRO. When we first took O'Neill's deposition, he said, I liked Fred Hampton, I had nothing to do with the raid. But we continued to press, and after several more months, we got a document. And the document was a floor plan of the apartment where Fred, and it said, apartment of Hampton and Johnson when they stay here. And it was the layout of the apartment with the front door, the rear door, the living room, the middle bedroom, and the room where Fred and Deborah were sleeping. It even demarcated the bed on a rectangle. And we noticed that when we watched the trajectory of the shots into the apartment, they came together at that bed, in the direction of that bed. And sure enough, it turned out the FBI had obtained that floor plan the day after a shootout in which a former Panther and two police had been killed. So they knew the police wanted to get revenge. So they got this floor plan and they took it to this ambitious state's attorney named Edward Hanrahan, who was running on a war on gangs platform. And so the raiders had that floor plan when they entered the apartment, followed that floor plan, and we believe showed it was the FBI intent to have Fred Hampton assassinated. We got another document after 3 more years of the trial. In fact, we got 200 volumes of documents that they had hidden. But one of the needles in that haystack was what we call the bonus document. And the bonus document said, we recommend a $300 bonus for William O'Neill because his information was invaluable to quote what one agent said, the success of the raid. So they were internally taking credit for the raid and for the deaths of Fred Hampton and Mark Clark. In spite of that evidence, things didn't go so well for us in court because we had a judge that was dead set against us. One day, I'll just give you an example. I was asking for documents which we were supposed to have gotten. And he says to me, Mr. Haas, you want everything. And I said, no, I don't, Judge. I just want a fair trial. And he looked at me and said, and you're not going to get it. And that was on the record. And it was part of the reason that we eventually, after 18 months, while the jury was deliberating and while they were hung, the judge decided to dismiss the entire case, which he did. So 7 years in, we had a dismissed case, $100,000 costs against the plaintiffs, $100,000 appeal bond. And we would have probably given up, except for the fact that we were representing Fred Hampton. And we thought, what would Fred do? Would he give up? And we didn't give up. And we got the 37,000-page transcript, and we appealed, and we got everything the judge did reversed. And we got one of the great civil rights opinions of all time. It said we had established a conspiracy. It reversed our contempt. It even said that the government's hiding of documents in the first trial could be presented against them in the second trial. And so we eventually did get a settlement. As I started writing this book, a few years ago. Fred, as is clear, had a real strong commitment to justice, and he talked to a lot of people early in his life about wanting to be a lawyer. But as Willie Calvin and Lynn French said, those were tumultuous times, and at some point Fred said, I don't have time to be a lawyer, I don't have time to go to school. But when I went to visit his home, and his parents still live in the same place, I said to his mother and brother, is there anything here, that any of his belongings that's still around? And they went downstairs and they brought up something from Fred's room, and it was a book by William Kunstler that Fred had checked out of the Maywood Library. And it's called Deep in My Heart, and it's the story of representing Dr. King in the South by one of the great civil rights lawyers of all times. And Fred didn't have time to be a lawyer, but he inspired us and the People's Law Office and many other lawyers to continue the struggle. The lesson, I think, is vigilance against government misconduct. We must demand that the government follow the Constitution and the laws, and that they be prosecuted if they're not, whether it be torture at Abu Ghraib or assassination of our leaders like Fred Hampton. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. And now I'm going to bring to the floor Akua Njeri, formerly known as Deborah Johnson. Akua is a former member of the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party. She is a survivor of the December 4th, 1969 assassination of Chairman Fred Hampton and Defense Captain Mark Clark. She is the widow of Chairman Fred Hampton and the mother of Chairman Fred Jr. Njeri is the chairperson of the December 4th Committee, which fights to defend and maintain the legacy of the Black Panther Party, and is the co-author of the proposal to name the Chicago block of 2300 West Monroe Chairman Fred Hampton Way. Njeri coordinates free clothing and fresh vegetable giveaways and other survival programs with the Prisoners of Conscience Committee, where she's also on the advisory board. Please join me in giving a warm welcome and honoring Akua Njeri.
Power to the people. Beat goes on. Y'all gonna make me cry. Well, Tracy took half of my speech because I always acknowledge members of the Black Panther Party that are in the audience. And I'm gonna do it anyway. I would like for y'all to stand up. And these are people that went toe-to-toe against an oppressive government that was of impact in every aspect of our lives. And those of you that was in the party, don't be checking the Rally Panthers that stood up, because that way the pigs don't know how many was in the party. Who said that? Okay. Well, I'm going to go by these questions, try to answer them. How did I get involved in the Black Panther Party? Well, the first thing, my younger brother brought this sheet home. It was just a white piece of notebook paper, and it had this Black Panther that was like walking across the page, it looked like. And to go along with that, I had heard about these crazy Black Panthers taking over these classrooms at Wilson Junior College, which later became Kennedy King, I think. They would take over, they would be smacking the teachers around and stand up and say, we want an education that teaches us our true history and our role in the present day society. I say, damn, they bad. Next thing, I saw the Black Panther Party on TV, this talk show, Ronnie Barrett's talk show. It's on Channel 9. And I saw Chairman Fred, Minister Rush, Iris, and Alvino Shin. Somebody else was on there, but I can't remember. And I was sitting there looking. I said, okay, this is who I've been, hearing about. And I sat there. It was real late at night, and I sat there with my mouth open. Chairman Fred took over the program. They were only supposed to be on the first half an hour. At the end of the discussion, when the Black Panther Party was talking about the survival programs and the organizing that they were doing, and Ronnie Barrett, this black and white TV then, y'all, there ain't no color. Ronnie Barrett say, okay, we'll be back after commercial break with our next guest, so-and-so and so-and-so. They came back after commercial break, and Chairman Fred was still talking. I still got to talk to my people. We organizing out in the communities. We ain't just talking the shit, we doing the shit. And he, little beeps and carrying on. And I was like, damn, they serious on this thing. So I started going to the office. I started going. At the time, I was at a city college on the north side, and they came over there to speak, and I tried to get my crew to go with me, my girlfriends. We hung out, and they was like, I ain't trying to hear that stuff. So I went by myself late. Anybody know me know I'm late all the time. Late, and Chairman Fred was speaking. He had the security people there, and then he said, after he got through speaking, I went up and sat in the front, of course. After he got through speaking, he said, and I want all the white people to leave because I want to talk to my brothers and sisters in the group that are here. So the white people say, well, we got to all work together. He said, we're going to have a crying session for y'all later, but right now I need to talk to my brothers and sisters. After the white people were all escorted out, he snapped out on us. We were in the Black Student Union debating over if white people could join the Black Student Union, because it was a school organization and you couldn't legally keep nobody out. And Chairman Fred went on this thing about it's people out there dying, pigs killing people every day, children starving, going to school, everybody know they ain't eating. And you talking about if white people could be in it, that's all y'all got to. And we was like, stupid, like, wow, that's really something. He started talking about the survival programs, what we want, what we believe. We want land, bread, housing, clothing, education, justice, and peace. And as our main political objective, a U.S. plebiscite in which only black people can participate for determining the will of the black community. Now, I hadn't said that in a long time. It just popped in my head. But it's certain things that you know as a party member that you never, never, ever forget. December 4th, 1969 was one of those times for me. And a lot of you are familiar with the survival programs of the Black Panther Party. People talked about the breakfast program, the Spurgeon Jake Winters Medical Center, the free clothing, shoe giveaway, free prison busing programs. And this was happening all over the country. And a bunch of people who didn't have a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of, young people were organizing these survival programs and demanding that the businesses that existed in the city, in the communities, had a responsibility to support and contribute to these programs. Whether it was space, whether it was resources, whether it was, giving us cars or whatever. But people had to be involved in this struggle in some way. Now, some people used to drive by the office, slow down and throw money up in there. They didn't even want nobody to see them giving us money. But the pigs would send pictures of them doing that to their jobs. And a lot of people, it's like, no, don't be calling me. Use a code name. I'm like, they still know you supporting, But anyway, we got a lot of support in the community because we had a newspaper, the Black Panther newspaper. And you could see in that paper, all over the world, black people were struggling for self-determination. Black people were not just getting beat down, but they was fighting back. And whether you in Chicago or Oakland, California, or any place that you were, black people were being oppressed in this country and all over the world. And the Black Panther Party didn't talk about it. They did something about it. And at the most basic level, organizing people to participate in their own struggle for liberation and freedom. That's a hell of a thing. You know, you say, oh, well, it's just a little breakfast program. But that was at a time when people were saying you can't fight City Hall, or the white man won't let you do this. And you see the whole transformation of a community when they could come in and feed children. You know what I'm saying? And the children, and we would talk to the children about what's going on in the community. Parents began to come, the mothers and the fathers began to come and participate in the survival program. And they said, them Black Panthers ain't so bad after all. And they began to participate. And that was the whole purpose of the survival program. So it's not this big omnipotent government that you can't, do nothing about. It was about showing the people that power to the people could become a reality. How would I describe Chairman Fred? Y'all notice I always refer to him as Chairman Fred. It's not just a little code name like you say your boo or whatever that I got for him, but he was the deputy chairman of the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party. We respected structure, we respected organization, and he'll always be Chairman Fred. He was a practical joker. He had a sense of humor. He chain smoked cool cigarettes. He hardly ever slept. But he ate, slept, breathed, lived, and died for the people. Nothing was more important than the people and his struggle for that. He was a revolutionary. He believed in socialism and was guided by the organizational structure of the Black Panther Party that was governed by a central committee and state levels, and then the branch local level. Like we worked the Illinois chapter, he was a deputy chairman of the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party, but in that office at 2350, don't tell me it's gonna come back. See, we lived, it was a vacant lot, and you could walk through the vacant lot and be right at our house where we lived, So I know that we was 2337 West Monroe, and the office was 2350 West Madison. So, so many things are running through my head. But he was a brilliant person. He was one and the same with the people, and two things are really sticking out. I know people come back, Chairman, I can't sell. This brother, he was over distribution, and you had to sell about 250 papers a week. And I said, dang, that's a lot. But this was at a time when we had the newspaper, and people was reading about struggle going on all over the world. So 250 wasn't really that bad if you set your mind to do it. Some people would get people to buy their whole thing, so they would. But the whole thing was to go out and interact with the people, to run down the party platform and program, to tell people it's part of the problem. Either part of the solution or part of the problem. No more fence straddling. Power to the people. And that's what we were doing out there. So Chairman said, I can't sell these 250 papers. He would go out there, his pants falling down. That's before sagging was important. A style. He wasn't sagging. The pants was just falling. Some old cheap shoes. Go right out there in front of the office on Madison and right before you get to Western. And he'd be, Black Panther newspaper, get your Black Panther newspaper. Read about people that are struggling in Oakland, California, people that are struggling all over the country. And you would feel kind of bad, he's the chairman, but he would be one and the same with the people. That's what was so beautiful and magnificent. And he said, we're going to live right here in the community, with the people. And like I said, we was a block from the office. Another thing, he would get up at night and be reading a book or, practicing a speech or relating something that happened to the day, in the day that he could break it down to the people to expose how a capitalist system is just a blood-sucking system. Much of that was demonstrated by the art of the Minister of Culture, Emory Douglas, who you'll be hearing from later on today. But he would be thinking of different ways to approach people and how he could do a speech and bring it to what's going on today. I remember a speech he made off of the Supreme, Someday We'll Be Together, when he talked about the brothers that had been murdered by the police, those that had been run out the country. And you could hear, someday we'll be together. People that was underground, you know. And he talked about that, and the people would get all excited, you know, and feel that they was a part of this. It was bringing the struggle home, so it wasn't this abstract thing. It was something that impacted on every aspect of our life. Whether we went to go buy a loaf of bread, whether you went to the hospital to get no health care, whether your children and yourself were miseducated in the schools, this whole revolutionary struggle impacted on everybody's. And a lot of y'all think somebody else started the Rainbow Coalition, but it was Chairman Fred that created it. Now, that wasn't like a patchwork quilt and we get together and sing Kumbaya. That was groups coming together that acknowledged and recognized the vanguard. We wasn't just saying we was a vanguard. We was recognized as a leadership, a revolutionary struggle inside the belly of this beast, America. These groups recognized the Black Panther Party as the vanguard of the revolutionary struggle. Now, that didn't mean that all these people were going to join the Black Panther Party. That wasn't what it was about. It was a coalition based on principle. We can get together on these things. We aren't each other's enemy. We have a common enemy, an oppressive U.S. capitalistic government that's imposing unjust laws on us, oppressing us, and murdering us in our sleep. That's what Chairman Fred was about. Okay, on the night of December 4th, the night of December 3rd, the morning of December 4th, there's a political education class, and I didn't go. O'Neill, who had been appointed head of security, he wasn't, Doc Satchel was pretty much chairman's bodyguard. Any of y'all knew Doc Satchel? He's about this tall. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but okay, this tall. Had the most cutest baby face. He looked like he was about 12. Chairman had went over to Circle Campus, and Doc was in his first semester medical school, and he heard Chairman Fred speak, and he's talking to Chairman, say he wanted to be a doctor. Now, any of y'all go to school know your first semester, you ain't taking no medical, nothing. You recording me? Yeah. I want a copy. Where was I? Doc Satchel. He wanted to be a doctor. So you know your first semester of college, you're not taking no medical nothing. You probably don't even have biology. You're just doing a general curriculum. But this little bitty, cute little guy wanted to be a doctor. And Chairman Fred was talking to him. He said, you're going to be our deputy minister of health. Okay. So Doc Satchel became the deputy minister of health, and under Chairman Fred's leadership, organized a free medical center. You know, every year they pick a community, usually a Black oppressed community that's the worst community in the country. It means crime is high, ain't nobody got no jobs, slum buildings, all this kind. Y'all know what I'm talking about. They would pick a community and say, this is the worst in the country. So Lawndale was consistently the worst in the country, according to the state, you know. And so this little guy, under leadership of Chairman Fred, organized Spurgeon J. Quinter's Medical Center. Now, this was before attention was brought to a disease called sickle cell anemia. And through the work of the Black Panther Party, the diagnosis and treatment for sickle cell anemia became standard in medical study. That's what the Black Panther did. Also, there was no free lunch or free breakfast. Well, they really called it free lunch, free breakfast now, but they give them some ketchup soup and some old stuff if they had lunch at the school. But the Black Panther Party was giving the children hot, nutritious meals. You know what I'm saying? And this is before, like I say, we didn't have nothing. But we demanded that these companies, and some did it freely, give us food and things. And you know what? Just about every time that we would stockpile, Tracy getting ready to give me a note, getting ready to stockpile the breakfast materials or the stuff for the medical center, we were guaranteed a raid, an attack on the office. They would pile it, we called them fire pigs. See, back then you couldn't even be a security guard. You know what I'm saying? Because the interest was, really, y'all know fire pigs, renter pigs, we call them renter pigs, security guards. You know, your interest was not the people, but protecting the state, protecting this business that's ripping you off in the community. So the fire pigs, they would come and put everything in the middle of the floor and set it on fire. And you know what I'm saying, get rid of the stubble. They could burn the building down. You know, we build it back and open again. I mean, we were living in conditions that y'all could, the pigs talk about at our apartment, it was a barricade, you know, across the kitchen. That was a door to keep the rats out. That wasn't no barricade, but I'm just saying, you know. So anyway, Doc Satchel organizes, and you could go to the medical center, you see this little baby-faced guy. The people are the most important thing in the making of revolution, to be ridden like oxen down the path of social revolution by the people. And Doc be snapping out on doctors and nurses and stuff. And they say, okay, Doc. Remember, one semester, but he had an undying love for the people. And this free medical center, regardless you had a green card, no money, you could come in there and get attention. And if the doctors didn't, patient advocates, if the doctors didn't talk to you right, they had to answer to Minister Doc. Okay. December 4th, the assassination. I'm not going to go through the whole thing because my time is short, and Tracy's been very gracious. I know she didn't let me go over. But they came in the front and the back with only possibly 2 shots coming from, one shot, I think, coming from the occupants, and that was Mark Clark, shot in the heart and falling to the floor. 2 pigs were grazed by bullets. They came in front and back, they shot each other, grazed each other. This is what the state said, not something I made up. And Chairman Fred, Defense Captain Mark Clark was assassinated. Other survivors were brutally wounded, kicked on the floor. And we were charged with attempted murder and aggravated assault. Well, we got a number of lawyers, some of them gone, Kermit Coleman, one of them, Skip Andrews, I don't know if he's still living. And a lot of them people, the attorneys told us, don't leave the apartment open because we have to preserve it for the legal fight. The Black Panther Party said, the people got to see what's going on. And that's going to be the only thing that's going to help us get the word out. So we kept the apartment open, and people were lined up around the block to come through, and they could see the trajectories of the bullets, with most of them aimed toward the head of the bed where Chairman Fred slept. And they had went in the room and stood over him and shot him at point blank. They later found out through an independent autopsy that he was given Seconal. He kept a big jug of red Kool-Aid. I don't have red Kool-Aid in my house to this day. Nor do I touch Good Humor ice cream. That's like a law in our house, because he was framed on a robbery. He said he robbed an ice cream truck. He was out on a pill bond, robbed an ice cream truck of $71 worth of ice cream. He said, I'm big, but I can't eat no $71 worth of ice cream. At least they made me a Robin Hood kind of thief. They say I gave it to the people. But, you know, despite other people coming forward and say that they participate in liberating this ice cream and giving it to the children, Chairman Fred was sent to Menard, where they sent the criminally insane, where they did testing with psychopathic drugs on various inmates. And the people loved him. He organized in some of the most brutal conditions. Okay. Lessons to be learned. Well, after we got out of jail because people came forth just throwing money in the office and get that pregnant girl out of jail. Because our son was born 3 weeks later on December 29th. And they had me handcuffed, jammed a revolver to my stomach, and said, "You better not try to escape." Well, I could hardly walk, let alone try to escape, and it was bitter cold out. What's to be learned from the Black Panther Party? Combat liberalism, dare to struggle, we will win. Power to the people.
Okay, we're running a little behind schedule, so I'm just going to go ahead and immediately open up the floor and take maybe 5 questions. Does anybody have any questions for the panel?
First and foremost, I want to say thank you. Like Dr. Matthew said, it's always an honor to have an intimate conversation with the people who actually live through it. My question is this. I have the opportunity of teaching at the University of Chicago Woodlawn Chapter Charter School, and we have 9th graders here. My question is, what would be, as a 9th grader, what would you have or what would you like for me to take? What would be the main idea or the main point you would want me to take from this panel discussion as I start my journey through high school and through college? Thank you.
Okay, I guess I'm elected to answer. It's kind of hard to summarize it into one point. I guess one of the things we used to say is dare to struggle, dare to win. And I think that the lesson is that as long as you're determined to control your own destiny, which is important, you just have to keep coming back no matter what they do, because they will go to any extremes to cut you down, but you just got to keep on keeping on. Is that too trivial sound? Anybody else want to add in?
I was just going to say that the important thing that Chairman Fred talked about was the getting your education and then knowing your history. It's important that you don't let someone else tell you who you are and what you should do, but it's important that you know your history and keep that forever in the minds of your children.
Quick question. At its height, how many Black Panther members were there?
Those who know, don't say.
And those who
Those
say
who
don't know.
Power to the people.
I want to say, first of all, I was 14 years old when this happened to Chairman Fred, and I can recall the Panthers being a very powerful force in their neighborhood, and I wasn't old enough to participate at that time, but they left an indelible impression on my life as a human being and what they stood for. The 60s were a turbulent time in our lives. I wish everyone here could have lived through the 1960s. There's nothing like the 60s. If you have not lived through the 60s, you have missed a revolutionary time in America. No doubt about that. A lot of things happened in the 60s, but I was old enough to remember most of them, at least in the late 60s. Jeffrey Harder just finished your book. Excellent book, excellent book. I always wanted to know the inside of what took place at that raid. I never knew that until I read your book. And I'll say this, it's one of the books I picked up I could not put down, okay? I read the whole book right through. I finished it the other night. Read it late at night. I finished it off in about 4 days. Long story short, I want to commend you for your history and putting together that book. It meant a lot to me as a human being to read it. The panel was awesome. I mean, you guys all have stories to tell. But Jeffrey, I have a question for you. What made you guys stick to the course? It took 12, 13 years for this thing to end. You knew what happened. You knew the police were doing what they were doing. The FBI were doing what they were doing. You guys stuck it out against all odds. I mean, You are Caucasian, representing black males primarily, and women that you're representing as well during the trial. But what made you stick it out and stand up and try to be a force with this whole thing?
Well, you mentioned the 60s, and I think the 60s was a time when struggling for people was a primary value. We weren't thinking of our own selves or what we could get, but there was this whole energy around the people's movement. The Panthers characterized that in many ways, and Fred did particularly. So like I said, you know, what we just said we're going to do it, and there were certainly days when we didn't want to and we were ready to give up. And like I said, we'd look around, you know, we might look at Akua, we might look at Iberia Hampton or Fannie Clark, who had lost somebody, who had been people, and we said, well, this is what we're supposed to do, and what would Fred do? And we knew what he'd do, you know, dare to struggle, dare to win. If you don't struggle, you don't deserve to win, damn it. And somehow we did it, and it is a lesson also for the ninth graders about whatever you believe in, go for it, and particularly if it's about the community and about helping other people. So I guess all of those things. Also, we were sort of a collective in our group, the People's Law Office, and I think we reinforced and supported each other during that time, even though we got a lot of help also from a number of black lawyers and other groups. So all of those things, we felt we had a duty to do, you know. The black community was outraged at the murder of Fred, and so we wanted to expose what happened. And we were personally outraged. I guess you read, I just told you what I felt like. Fred Hampton, this guy, is murdered, and I'm outraged about it. And so you know, some people say, well, you shouldn't be outraged, but I think outrage about injustice is one of the things, a good motivator for us. So I guess all of those things.
I wasn't 14 at the time of December 14th. I remember Jake Winters, I remember Lance Bell, and the beat still goes on, Chairman Fred. My question is to Calvin and sisters up there. I feel that the black community as a whole has been drugged and comatose since December 4th. Our leadership, our unity, our sense of where we're going. And I see these young people here, and I see so many, I pick up the newspaper every day and hear about so much violence going on in the neighborhood. Where can we look for our new leadership at?
I think you said it right. The community was drugged, and one of the major things that happened was there became a drug war between young individuals trying to get money to do things that they wanted to do. I think where we go from here is to continue to press forward, to believe in ourselves that we can achieve, and that, again, we have to believe that we can achieve and stop allowing other people to determine your destiny. That's where the problem is. I think you need to set, first of all, I think one of the things that I dislike every year when they have the going back to school and they have all of this hype about, let's go back to school, let's go back to, we want to have 99% participation so we can get money. I think we need to be out there. If you're getting on the bus and you don't have any school supplies, you're not getting on the bus. Because if you go to school, you're going to be disruptive. And so we have to stop allowing people to go in and having teachers to fight to teach. Our job is to say, we got to teach them at home. Don't send the child to school and talk about what the teacher should be doing. You should be reinforcing what is already being determined. We've got to go and say, here are things that we want our students to learn and to know, because this is what the future is going to look like, and we're going to the school administration and demand that these courses are being taught. So those are the things that we as parents will have to do, and we have to start doing it immediately.
The war on drugs is nothing but a war on the black community, plain and simple. Now, you might, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that, excuse me, I didn't realize you. I think that, I hear what you're saying about where's the leadership, but I think that the common denominator that all of us had, everybody who was in the party, was we weren't waiting. We did meet Fred, but what we had in common was that we were all concerned with determining our own self-destiny and with changing things. And I think that no one can afford to sit around and wait for another Fred or for a perfect leader. What we have to do, if we see a need, is you have to step up to the plate.
Absolutely. I hate to belabor your question, but you did address me. The war on drugs is nothing but a war on the black community. We didn't have crack cocaine back then, did we? Okay? And even the little bitty children on the street say that we don't own the trains, the boats, and the planes to bring it in. They impose these drugs. It might be crack this year, might be heroin. Like you make a choice what drug come in your community. And then they create this war on drugs, which is nothing but a war on black and oppressed communities, to justify a massive prison lockup. Most everybody in here, y'all don't have to raise your hand because some of y'all are ashamed. Most everybody in here got somebody locked up. Probably more than half of your family, if you really look at it. And some of them, they tell you they're going away to college, but a lot of people is locked up on some bogus shit. The disparity in sentencing, rock and powder, cocaine. And these people getting 2 and 3 life sentences. You have black elected officials that voted to build TAMs, the Supermax, that had some of the most brutal and inhumane conditions that, look, they say you get out of TAMs in 2 ways, either a box or you go into the nut house. A box is the casket, or you go into the nut house. But we have to continue to fight, and I'm very honored to work with the group, sit on the advisory board, work with them, POCC, Prisoners of Conscience Committee, that is chaired by Chairman Fred Hampton, Jr. And they up front and challenging it. They heightening and exposing and raising contradictions much in the same way we did. They used to say you shouldn't air your dirty laundry. See, Black Panther newspaper, we would have art of these so-called leaders that were in bed with capitalism, in bed with imperialism. It was a drawing Emory did where it had this big sow, capitalism, and all them sellouts sucking on her tits. You know what I'm saying? They said, you shouldn't talk about black people. They weren't our leaders. They were appointed, anointed. And they give you certain leadership that will have you thinking they're fighting in your interests, but they looking for the next grant. Some of y'all don't like that because a lot of y'all join up with them. You know what I'm saying? So, again, they're the struggle. We will win.
Excuse me, Deborah, I wasn't just talking about the drugs out there in the street.
No.
A lot of us ran like little rats after the 4th.
Absolutely.
When the subpoenas came, when the FBI started sending out the subpoenas.
Absolutely.
We ran because we didn't know who was talking and who was...
Absolutely. I agree. But I don't have the time to talk about everything that happened to us. Because y'all see, I get long-winded.
I think we're going to have to let this be the last one, and then the first person in line can be, the person that people after will be first the next go-round, if that's okay. Because we're running short on time, and we got to get the next panel going before we get put out of the room.
Yeah.
This question is for Jeff. I was listening to the panelists, in particular Akua and yourself, and I was kind of unclear on whether you were the Hamptons' lawyer or not. That's the first question. And the second question is, did you consult Akua and Chairman Fred Hampton Jr. before you wrote this book?
On the morning of December 4th, we were Panther lawyers. There was not, we didn't know what was going to happen. We got the call from Bobby Rush, the People's Law Office did. As I said, I went and interviewed the survivors. The rest of my partners went to the apartment. And everything else sort of flowed from that. We did most of the work for a long time. Then Jim Montgomery, who had represented Akua, came and joined us for the trial. So for most of the trial, it was basically us and Jim Montgomery and Herb Reed and support from a number of other people representing all of the plaintiffs. There wasn't that division. In terms of writing the book, I wrote it a lot from my own memory, from the documents and so forth. I did make efforts to interview Akua to write the book, and I did have the benefit of a great deal of her testimony, interviews, and so forth, and I tried as much as possible to remain true to those.
So you were a part of the legal team or not? I wasn't
Oh,
clear.
absolutely. I mean, yeah, I was in court every one of those days for 18 months, and most of the 3 or 4 years on appeal, absolutely, yes.
And when you say you recollected from your memory from 40 years ago?
No, well, when I wrote the book, it was a combination of what I remembered. We had a 37,000-page transcript to work off of. We had motions. We had newspaper articles. I interviewed people. I mean, everything. There was, of course, the movie, The Murder of Fred Hampton, which you saw, which recorded Fred's speech exactly, of course, as it was. So I used everything that I could to bring back, you know, as much as I could about. And part of it, though, is a personal narrative. It's my story. It's not everybody who was there has a different story. So I can't speak for everybody. This is, I told you what, when the knock on my door came from Skip Andrew, and I went and followed that. The knock that Akua heard was from the cops before they came in shooting, and if they knocked. And then, so we all had a different experience, and I attempted to tell my story and also include as much as I could, and spent a lot of time also going into Fred's background as much as I could.
So I'd like you all to help me join me in thanking the panel.
Thank you, Tracy.
And
Thank all of you. Thank you, Tracy.